This is a podcast about new crops. You're going to love it. Join us on The Cutting Edge, a podcast in search of new crops for Wisconsin.
We were wrong. In fact, they did grow outside, and we're still learning all the time how to make them grow better.
Welcome to The Cutting Edge, a podcast in search of new crops for Wisconsin. I'm your co-host, Jerry Clark. I work with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension, serving as an agricultural agent. And my co-host today is Evan Henthorn.
Yes, thanks, Jerry. So I'm the agriculture educator in Adams County. So it's great to connect with everybody again and be in a space that we can talk and continue to talk about saffron for our, third session now, Jerry, is that right?
Yeah, we're on to episode 3, as we could call it. So we're kind of starting the trilogy here if you're, a Star Wars fan or anybody like that. But we'll try to get the ratings that Star Wars does, but we got a ways to go. But yeah, today we have the Vermont gang back with us for the most part. We've got Margaret Skinner and Arash from University of Vermont as researchers on saffron. And also we have John Polipiv. John is one of our growers here in Wisconsin at Breadbasket Farm in Hortonville, kind of on the eastern side of the state. And new to our podcast team today is Brian Levin. He's a saffron grower from Golden Thread Farm in Stowe, Vermont. And Margaret tells us he's got a fantastic website that I just pulled up, and it does look great, so we can cover that as we go along. But Margaret was giving us a rough time for not checking that out earlier. But today we're going to kind of focus on the production side of things. If you've listened to our earlier podcasts, we've kind of covered a brief, kind of a high-level overview of what saffron is, and then kind of dug into the marketing the last time. So Evan, today I think we're going to try to dig into kind of that the production side of it. And that's where we have Brian and John to kind of lead us along that path on their experiences, as well as what Margaret and Arash have experienced from their growing standpoint. All right. So Margaret, if you want to give us kind of that background again on maybe how you got started, why farmers are growing it in Vermont, and how your project, you and Arash have expanded this project.
Arash is from Iran, and Iran is the number one producer of saffron worldwide. And when he came to Vermont, he said, "Why aren't you growing saffron in Vermont?" And I said, I don't know. And we started looking into it. And obviously one of the reasons in my mind, I work with small farms throughout Vermont, most of which are growing vegetables or ornamentals, and they have a hard time making a living. And so for me, I thought, geez, if growers could also grow saffron in our area, that would be a great supplemental income for them, because saffron sells for between $20 and now $50 a gram. So that is potentially a lot of money, and it's produced at the most intensive labor time of the year is in October and November, and that's when most field crops are done. And so it seemed like an ideal fit, similar to maple syrup production, except at a totally different season. So, so you might ask, well, what growers are coming to you to ask more about saffron? And there's quite a wide range of different kinds of growers. Probably most commonly, we are targeting these small Vermont farms who have some land. Maybe they don't have too much land, but they have some land and some experience growing produce. A lot of them sell at farmers markets, which make an ideal way for marketing saffron. So that's kind of was our initial target. However, we get calls from all sorts of different kinds of people. One of the common ones is people say, well, I'm an educator right now and I'm planning on retiring, and I have some land in Vermont, some agricultural land that isn't really being used right now, and I want to come back to Vermont. I want to reestablish the farm there, and I'd love to grow saffron. Partly they're saying, I know I won't make enough money on my Social Security, and so I want this as a supplemental income without having to go full tilt into a whole agricultural production system.
So,
Yeah.
oh, so we're talking about a small, high intensive, from a labor standpoint, a little more intensive from that standpoint, smaller acreage. So that's where it fits in with obviously
Yep.
small farms or
Yep.
individual. And I guess I'd lean on Brian and John a little bit on this next question. Is from a land standpoint, production, what do you call soil type, that kind of thing? Has that driven some of your decision making as far as I'm going to try this because it fits a certain production system?
Brian,
so go ahead,
you're the
Brian.
guest.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, thanks. I grow mine in high tunnels, these cold frame hoop houses. So, it's really contained entirely within the space of those two hoop houses. I do have this plot of land where I started this farming operation, and it's about 10 acres, most of which I'm not using yet. So. If I'm looking into the future, expanding production, I have room to put additional hoop houses out there. But again, it's a really condensed into a very small unit when it comes down to it.
Yeah, and for me, we have just under 4 acres of land at our farm. We live in Kimberly, and our farm is in Greenville, Hortonville area. So it takes up very little space. We planted in a section about 25 by 50 foot section, and we used about a 30-inch bed system, which is very similar for other market garden type farms like we have. So it kind of fits in. And previously we planted garlic in that same bed. So it was just trying to standardize things, and it doesn't take up very much space for us. And we have about 210 by 800 foot property, and it's a southern sloped facing direction. From the top of our property, to the very bottom, it drops to about 50 feet very incrementally. So it seems like it's pretty good drainage, and it's just a good amount of sun. And the soil fertility, we have like a silty loam, very good topsoil. The area by where our farm is, the Hortonville, Greenville area, is very rich soil. So we're fortunate for that.
Awesome. Brian, I kind of want to circle back to you because you mentioned something. You mentioned that you were growing it in hoop houses. So first, can you just kind of say, like, how did you get into this? Like, what's the why that you started growing saffron? And then can you just kind of move into, like, why are you growing it in a hoop house versus another method?
Sure. Well, like I said, we had this piece of land, and I did have an interest in doing something agricultural with it. It's a great field, big expansive field, full sunlight. And, we had the room. It wasn't until Arash and Margaret did their first studies, and the reports came out from UVM that maybe growing saffron in Vermont could be a nice little, could be a successful way to farm the land. And for me, I mean, I really appreciate in Vermont, we have a lot of farm to table restaurants, a lot of just great quality food products, beer, all kinds of spirits. And it's kind of a fun industry to be involved in too. So for me, because I'm kind of a foodie, if I was going to produce something, I wanted to produce something that I liked. And I do love saffron. It's certainly something that was very new when I started, and now there's a bunch of small farms now in Vermont, or even some larger operations that are growing it.
Awesome. So Brian, you touched on it, that this has inspired you to grow, and I feel confident saying that with growth there always comes though that the challenge or things that set you back. So can you just touch on, like, what were some parts of your production that set you back, or things that you had to learn from to be able to grow to where you're at now?
Sure, and I think I can answer that in combination with the other question you had about growing in a high tunnel.
Yeah.
Because in the reason, when I first started, I actually did have one bed outdoors, but the recommendation from UVM was because of our very cold climate, the growing them in a high tunnel was recommended. I also discovered that you can get a grant from NRCS, the division of USDA, that will fund a high tunnel, and basically pay for all the materials. So I pursued that, at least for one of my high tunnels, and I actually just found out there's no limit on the number you can apply for. So I've already been in touch with the local office about getting another one going, because I'm going to have to transplant in a couple of years, and they're going to take up a lot more room once I do the transplanting, because there's just going to be so many more corms. But as far as some of the setbacks, growing in a high tunnel, you do need to water in the winter, and unless your high tunnel is warm enough, I was shutting my water down for the coldest months, and then kind of being late to the game at the end of the winter when some of my crop was starting to go into its dormancy stage just before it was the optimal time to do that. So I'm working on keeping my greenhouses cooler in the winter now, which so that hopefully they won't dry out as quickly. But I'm also now I have some heating lines in my pipes. But I think if I had to do it again, I would work in some way to keep the minimum temperature above freezing, whether implementing some sort of geothermal heating system or something, so that I could just keep the water on all winter and not have to worry about the pipes freezing, and being able to water and not compromising the crop when I do water, because it's inevitably going to fall below zero for stretches of time. And but when it gets sunny the next day, these greenhouses warm up to 70, 80 degrees, even if the ambient air temperature outside is below zero. So
Awesome.
that, all kinds of challenges. And I'll say, I found the outdoor bed I had proposed challenges because as soon as the snow as soon as it melts in the spring, the deer, at least in my neighborhood, it's the only green thing out there, and they would just mow it down overnight. So I did manage to salvage that bed, but I moved it indoors to the second hoop house I built.
So John,
Awesome.
John, in kind of contrast to what Brian's explaining, what's been your challenge then, as far as in the ground here in Wisconsin versus in a high tunnel in Vermont?
Yeah, well, I mean, Vermont is it's beautiful. So I guess if you can't be enjoying the outdoor scenery, you might as well enjoy the warmth in high tunnel. So I think I got a lot of inspiration from Vermont and University of Vermont, the work that Rosh, Margaret are doing. And I initially did start at a little high tunnel, but in crates. And then I also started a raised bed. This was on our home property. And then I realized the ones that did for us, the ones that were outdoors, the performance was better. Probably what, Brian alluded to, like there is more maybe care and watering and other things and other factors that I just wasn't able to commit to at that time. And I found that for me, like the raised bed type system works better, less maintenance for me in the off season. And the deer pressure and animal pressure, initially I did notice some damage. So we put in like a plastic fencing that we got from the DNR. There's programs if you have some crop damage. We had some other crops for our diversified vegetable farm. We had some damage, and that's helped a lot. We haven't had any damage, I think, in the last 2 years in our bed systems that we've had from deer. But we did have a little bit, I think maybe some corm rots because there were some low spots in our beds. So moving forward, I think what we're going to do is make sure that if there's any sinking or any, shifting, like we make the beds tall enough, and then ensure that there's just good drainage all throughout. Because the beds that were a bit higher, there was no low spots, those have performed well. and they come back every year. And you know, we had some weed pressure and things like that, but overall, we liked that functionality of using that space outdoors for now, but we're looking to experiment and trial other ways. So maybe a high tunnel would be a good way to kind of diversify how we grow.
So Margaret and Arash, I guess from your research standpoint, looking at production, is that something you're looking at in addition to varieties or those kind of things? Are you looking at production systems? I know it's been a new research crop for the University of Vermont. What are you researching or looking at down the road here, or currently researching in terms of that production stuff that, you know, John and Brian have been addressing?
Yeah, actually, we are mostly thinking about different planting methods, and at some points, we are looking at a crop rotation for saffron plants, because as I told you, saffron has a different life cycle. It grows in the winter, fall and winter, and then in the field, when we have it in the field in the summer, we don't have any green leaves. So we are thinking these days to develop an intercropping system with saffron in the field. And saffron is a perennial crop, so we have to work on the fertility of the soil. We are doing research to find the optimal soil situation for saffron, because we keep it for a long time, like 3, 4, 5 years in the ground. We have to keep the soil fertility over the time. So is another aspect that we are working these days on it. Saffron quality is another aspect of saffron production, and especially marketing, that we are working on it. We have a cooperation with the chemistry department. Saffron does not produce seeds, it's a triplet crop, and so we don't have different variation. We don't have different, like, it's not like corn and maize. It's like we have just one Quercus sativus. We have different genotypes, but they are almost like each other. One thing that I wanted to mention when Brian was talking about saffron in the high tunnel and in the greenhouse, we have some other crops that have been grown in high tunnel and greenhouses for a long time, like tomato. It came to the greenhouse like many, many years ago, and growers have enough experience on that. But saffron production in the high tunnel, in the control chamber, or the area which is covered, is like, we don't have enough experience on it. And like working with the growers and other people gives us this opportunity to find the problem and challenges that they face in those production systems. So maybe in the future, if we find source of funding, we will design a trial to work on that aspect as well.
One other thing, growers might get confused, because indeed, when we started out, we hypothesized that saffron would not survive outside. That we couldn't get a decent crop, or they wouldn't survive over multiple years. That's why we originally started growing them in high tunnels. We were wrong. In fact, they did grow outside, and we're still learning all the time how to make them grow better. And what has happened now, which is exciting but challenging, is it's not just growers in Vermont or in Wisconsin who are interested in growing saffron. There are people in Rhode Island and Virginia and Texas and Arizona and California, and their situation, each one of those different locations offer challenges and opportunities. And so there's a steep learning curve, and that's where having growers involved in the research is really important, because it'll help us answer the questions faster.
Yeah, one thing that I want to add is, like, initially we looked at saffron very scientifically, and we came from stat to biology. We just calculated that when we cover Vermont state with a layer of plastic, with the temperature that we will have under that layer of plastic, will be similar to arid and semi-arid area that saffron came from. So then we decided, oh, if we have this kind of situation, we can plant saffron. And when we were working on that, a guy came to us and say, hey, I have saffron in the field. Why don't you plant it in the field when you can? And so we said, oh, okay, if you have it there, we have to try it as well.
So, okay, so in my mind, and maybe we kind of covered this, but like, what's the coldest that saffron can, if it's outside, what's the coldest that it can tolerate before we start to see damage? I'm just kind of like thinking about Wisconsin, and we're starting to get warmer here, but the month of April can always throw us a good curveball, and we could get a cold spell, or we could get a ton of snow yet. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, if producers here started growing it this time of year, this early April, and then we get some cold weather, like, how are we going to be okay with like that little bit, or should they be concerned, or kind of talk about like that, or have we done research on that?
Margaret, do you want to answer that?
I can speak later from
dear.
Wisconsin, but yeah.
I wish we knew.
Okay.
I wish it was black and white.
Sure.
And the reason it's not is because, like you said, sometimes you get snow in Vermont and probably in Wisconsin in early October, right when the flowers are coming out. A couple of years ago, we got it got cold early, and it never warmed up again. And in that particular year, the flowering was very bad, harvest was very bad, kind of like the maple syrup season that we've had this year. Maple syrup producers, they made 10% of what they usually made, and that was because we got this warm spell. Go figure. And so it's really hard to say. So my gut feeling, not based on research, I'd have to say, if we had an open winter with no snow the entire winter, I think the corms would suffer. I don't know. The way saffron grows is you put the corm in the ground in the fall, and we call it the mother corm or the original corm or whatever. Every year, the baby corms that are produced by that mother corm are on top of that original mother corm. So every year, that clump of corms gets more abundant, but gets closer to the surface of the soil, which means they're more susceptible to freeze damage. So, you know, it would be nice to say, okay, we'll take a corm and we will just put it in the freezer and see if it dies. But that's not going to tell us anything, because it doesn't tell us the finer points about what's happening underneath the ground. And a saffron corm in October is probably less cold hardy than that same corm in February or March. It's kind of like, you know, if you have an early cold spell and your shrubs haven't hardened off, they will suffer from that cold. So not to hem and haw about this, but there are lots of factors that make it very difficult to scientifically answer your question.
Yeah.
What is the cold temperature that you need to not get below? Because I don't think we know.
Sure. So there's more what I'm hearing is there's more research or more information to come on it, which is good. Jonathan, what have been your observations just kind of being a grower in Wisconsin with that same type of question?
Yeah, so I initially, when I started growing it, I had thought, well, maybe I could grow this very similar, because the research from University of Vermont and on the internet, which generally in the internet, it was hard to find solid information except University of Vermont and Saffronet, but it seemed like the spacing was really key. And also for efficiency, like I think we went with spacing them out every 6 inches and planting about every 6 inches deep. And that was we did 5 rows like that in a 30-inch system. And that was a pretty good system for us. And we found that the corms, when we did that and made sure they're in that depth, we didn't cover them in the winter. they've been generally surviving. And part of that, I think, because some of that snow acts almost like an insulating blanket. And so it's really kind of shocking. Like sometimes you get a little warm up, or maybe some of the snow melts, and then you see this green, beautiful foliage, and it's like that's amazing. That plant is still alive. And I think part of that is the fertility underneath the soil and the root structure, the mycorrhizal fungi, how it adds and maybe adds value to that root and the development of those corms. So I think for us, we've had like this even late winter, early spring here, really cold temperatures, wind chills 20, 30, 40 below. And our corms look beautiful. I haven't dug any out this spring yet, but the foliage indicates that they've generally survived well, and including multiplied. Same thing with our garlic. We had areas we didn't insulate. Normally we put straw on it. We didn't, and those survived too. So these are amazing plants. They're really hardy. At least from my experience in growing in Wisconsin so far in our spot.
So I know with go ahead, Margaret.
Well, one thing about high tunnels is it's investing a lot of money potentially, though the advantage in Vermont and other states is these days you can get a lot of support from the government. But so you have this very, not high tech, but a high quality area, and you're growing saffron, and it has to stay there all year long, even though you're only getting the value of a crop potentially at one time of the year. And a lot of people, vegetable growers, they don't want to do that. They want to use that space for tomatoes or other high value crops during the rest of the year. One of the things that we would really like to do is start investigating, are there other crops that could be grown on top of saffron so that you could really make full use of that high tunnel. But ultimately, you got to move those corms out. They can't stay in that same location, whether it's in the high tunnel or out in the field. You have to develop a whole rotation system, because just like all crops, they will, it'll start, there will be disease and insect issues that you want to avoid. And so it is important to, even at an early stage when people are starting to decide how to grow their saffron, they need to come up with a rotation plan, recognizing that someday I got to move those saffron out of the high tunnel or out of that field that used to have garlic in it. And Brian's going to have to work on that too. That he's going to need to develop some other cool crops that are of interest. Cool as in, isn't that cool, man?
Hip. Isn't hip? We're dating ourselves now.
So, and Arash talked about that a little bit, that we are trying to start thinking about how do you develop a rotation system that encourages, good crop fertility, as well as reducing disease pressure, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a work in progress, but people need to be thinking about that as they're going forward.
Yeah. But one thing that I want to mention is like, when we are talking about cold situation, we have to think about soil texture as well. It's really important. If you have a clay soil, or growers have clay soil, and they also in the area with the cold climate, they should be a little bit worried, because especially in the January, February, those kind of, because in the clay soil, we don't have a good drainage system technically. The water stay there, and in the frozen or cold nights, the plants can be affected by that cold. So my recommendation is like, if you are in the cold climate, try to find a piece of land in your farm which has a lighter, like sandy soil texture. It helps you a lot.
So the way it sounds that when the mother, so you mentioned, Arash, that it's a perennial, but it's kind of a short-lived perennial. So maybe 3 to 5 years, and then you need to move it. Or I know we're kind of still at the early stages of this, but then you dig up the whole corm. Can you divide those daughter corms off and propagate those, or do you move that whole corm into a new field or a new hoop house at that same time? whoever wants.
Arash,
Yeah.
you want to answer that?
Okay, yeah, sure. The mother, yes. Technically, the mother corm that we planted produce some baby corms for us each year and die after a year. We don't have the mother corm after a year. So even after one life cycle, you can dig up the corms and replant them somewhere else. But it's not really usual when you want to produce flowers, because usually people see more flowers in the second and third year
Okay.
of production. After like 3, 4, 5 years, you can dig the corms up, all of them, and sell some of those if you have extra, because I said each mother corm produces some baby corms. That means the number of baby corms under the ground get increased like exponentially. So you can sell some of the corms that you produce and you don't want that, and keep some of those and replant them somewhere else. Don't plant your baby corms at the same plot that you had saffron before. Keep the rotation.
So Brian, maybe you can talk to that. When you dug up your corms that were outside, what did you find?
Yeah, and I have my questions too on this, but I found corms of all different sizes, and I had my son help me. We didn't want to miss any, so we would dig up an area and we screened the soil. I mean, and there's got to be a better way. So I'm hoping you guys are working on this. But this one outdoor bed I had was 60 feet long and 4 feet wide, and it probably had a few thousand corms in it originally. And then I had corms of all sizes. There were some very mature ones, and when I replanted them, I sort of replanted them according to size. So that I spaced out the largest ones at one end of the bed, and as I moved down this new bed I made, it's actually almost 2 beds worth I made. They get gradually smaller. So, but what I'm wondering is what happens to the tiny little baby corms, because my understanding is they really rely on the mother corm for the nutrients, and if they're separated out now, how well are they going to survive? And I guess this is a bit of an experiment that I'm doing here to see how well that process plays out.
Arash, are you going to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So those really tiny saffron corms, they are not able to produce saffron flowers for sure, but they are still have enough nutrition to produce some small leaves for us. And if you don't plant them really deep, they will come up after you plant them. So they will be, or they should be able to produce some big baby corms after a year. So you have to plant them. They are able to produce something for us, not saffron flowers, but definitely they are able to produce baby corms for us. But the key is like, don't plant them that deep. If you plant them like 6-7 inches deep, they will die. They don't have enough nutrition to produce big leaves and catch the surface of the ground. But when you plant them like 2, 3, 4 inches deep, they should be able to produce something for you.
The one other thing, Brian, that's important, that mother corm at the end of the year, after everything goes dormant, that mother corm is finished. She's dead. Sorry. She is not providing any food source or anything for those babies. So when you say, oh, should I separate them or keep them together? There's no value in keeping them associated with the mother corm. In fact, I think the mother corm, because it's just dead material, could be a source of decay. But when you have a bunch of those little ones, Arash said don't plant them too deep. You also can plant them much closer together, because the reason you space them out more, like John was talking about, every six inches, is that what you're doing, John? You don't need to do that with the little ones because they don't need that much space.
And Margaret, I think it's not a bad idea. You share the thing that you sow in the hort farm with the small corns. You remember we planted?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we had a bunch of small corms, just like what Brian was talking about. And Arash said, oh, let's just plant them out, out in this area. And it was kind of late in the season. And I thought, oh, what a waste of time, because there's no way they're going to grow. And sure enough, there was no sign of any green leaves this fall. And I thought, okay, they're going to just die because they didn't come up early enough. Oh my God, the snow melted, and they're now, the leaves are maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches tall. So, oh, darn it, I was wrong again.
I was going to say, sometimes it's not wrong to be bad, or it's not bad to be wrong. Like I said, right? You're always learning about it.
Yep.
So Margaret and Arash, can you just touch on, like, if I'm a brand new grower or I'm a homeowner and I want to get into this, like, where do I start? How do I jump into this? And then maybe John and Brian, maybe you can follow up after them.
Arash.
Okay, but Margaret listed some items for me.
Yeah.
So for sure, first of all, you have to get some information. Read about saffron, get information about the life cycle, pest and disease, and these kind of things. Then you have to find a place to plant the saffron corms. So if you have a farm, you go and find a place that you get more sunlight and you have a better or lighter soil texture, like sandy soil. Then develop a business plan, which is really important, because if you are producing something for selling, you have to find a market for it, for sure. And having the business plan is really important. It is complicated. It takes time. It's not easy, I should say. Order the saffron corms right now. It's the time to order the saffron corms, because some of the saffron corm sources are not in United States. We have to import saffron corms, or they should export it to United States. So they get the orders right now and they process your order. And if you do it right now, you will get the corms by August and September. Prepare the planting bed is very important. Is not, especially in the climate like New England climate and soil situation, we have to deal with weeds. So it's better to be proactive, go to the field, control the weeds with cover crops or tilling the soil, whatever you can. And that's it. Sorry if I forgot something else. Margaret.
There's one more thing. Start small. You know what John did, and I think what Brian did the first year, they plant, I don't know, 1,000 corms, less than 1,000 corms. John, what'd you start out with?
I started with 150 corms originally.
Yep. Brian, what'd you start out with?
No, I was a little more aggressive. I started with the 10,000.
Oh my God. Generally speaking, we encourage, if growers think this is the crop for them, maybe start out with 1,000 or 2,000 just to see how it feels, to see whether this is the crop for you, because you do have to bend over quite a bit at certain times of the year. You need to make sure that your soil is the right place for it. And so better to start on a small scale. And I'd have to say, back in 2017, growers were saying, oh, wow, I'm going to make $100,000 an acre, and I'm going to start with 2 acres. And we said, no. And luckily, except for Brian, people had adhered to our recommendations, and most people started small. And some people have then expanded and gotten much bigger. And then other people have said, maybe this isn't for me. And that's fine. We don't, to be honest, growers in Vermont, they got really excited about hemp. They were going to make so much money on hemp. And farmers started growing hemp on every darn piece of property they possibly could find. And they lost money. They invested a lot in those plants and it didn't pay off. And Arash and I and all of us at the center really don't want that to happen to anybody. And so even though it's not as good for us when we talk about the industry, the saffron industry, you know, it's more impressive when you have people growing thousands of acres of stuff, but that's not going to help the growers.
Yeah, I'm glad that Jonathan started with few corms. He actually listened to us very well. And Brian, however, he started in a big like scale farm, but he's doing great.
Yeah.
And he's the only guy that I have seen the farm, and I saw that he made the raised beds like similar to a recommendation, and the system that he's producing saffron in it is awesome. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Raj. I appreciate it. It was, you know, originally we're like, well, hey, this is a cool crop. It looks fun, and you know, you know, as Raj had said, there's a list, you know, that Margaret made for us to kind of answer some questions. So, you know, we started growing it for a number of reasons, and one of them was the therapeutic values. My wife has endometriosis, and we really wanted to find out, hey, maybe we can make some tea with this. Maybe we can cook in our food to help alleviate some of the menstrual pain and suffering my wife and many other women have had. I think I saw an article on Atlantic that saffron used to be considered like the Prozac of the Middle Ages by medieval nuns. There's an article called "The Spice That Hooked Medieval Nuns." Anyway, really interesting stuff, but we wanted to kind of grow it and find out, can we grow this for that, but also can we grow it with our diversified market farm? And that's what we did. So we started and it adapted, and then the year after we bought 2,500 corms. So at this point, there was a slight increase in investment, but had we done that initially, we probably would have lost more than half of the corms due to our ignorance. So following the recommendations has been really good, and the wealth of knowledge on the saffron net has been incredible. There's some really gracious people, experienced growers. I think the knowledge that I learned wouldn't come anywhere else, because you find so much, you know, just information on the internet that's just not valuable. So I really, really encourage anyone to look first on Saffron Net before you go and make purchases, before you go to the hardware store and buy some corms. There's different type of crocuses that maybe, you know, you'll grow the wrong type. You want to get the Crocus sativus that grows in the fall, and then go from there. But yeah, start small, keep learning. It's a fun crop to grow, but if you just dump all your money into it, you're going to lose a lot of money and real quick. It's supposed to be fun. Growing food and cool things like this is fun. So that's why we keep doing it, but also to complement the rest of our veggies that we're growing and the value added products. We started doing some infused syrup, maple syrup, another inspiration from Vermont. And it's really tasty. It's just fun to do these things because it stores well, it complements other food, and complements our farm.
Great.
Spoken like a true farmer, John. You're doing it for fun. That's why farming is...
and, you know, pay the bills too, but yeah, working on that.
I have one question. Can I ask a question?
Sure. Go ahead, Brian.
And maybe this is for John. So here in Vermont, cheddar cheese is like an off-white color, but in Wisconsin, it's an orange color. And so I'm wondering, and so in saffron, in Vermont, saffron is an orange color. I'm wondering if maybe in Wisconsin it's a different color.
Oh man, Brian, it's funny you mentioned cheese. We work with a co-op with a local farmer, or they Red Barn Family Farms. So that's a conversation I'll ask them actually. But our saffron I'm looking at your pictures on your website, and beautiful, by the way. It looks very similar. It's like this richer dark, and then we harvest more of the thread. So it's got a little bit of that orange and some of that yellow too. So it looks good and delicious, just like yours looks like too.
Yeah, right on. I figured as much when Arash was explaining earlier how there's only one variety.
But I do think that maybe the nutritional value and the taste it's going to be different and unique based on where you grow it. Just like any vegetable, if it's void of nutritional value, or the all the things that are in the earth, like it's just going to taste flat. So I think it tastes great and it grows well. So
Yeah.
Well,
Very
great.
good.
This has been a fantastic few minutes here to visit with you folks. I think I'll just wrap it up with Margaret and Arash. Any final comments? Then we'll get some from Brian and John, and if maybe down the road we can visit sometime during the growing season again, an update on how things are going in Vermont and here in Wisconsin. So Margaret and Arash, any final comments for today?
Well, John mentioned Saffron Net, which is an email listserv, and it's free to subscribe. And there are about 780 people from all over the country and all over the world. And ideally, people that are on it have done their homework enough so that they know the basics of saffron. But when people contact me to ask if they can get on the list, I always send them 6 or 7 different fact sheets that will give them the information about how to learn more about it. We also have a website, which is pretty comprehensive. It could be better, I'm sure, but at least it gives as much information as we have available at this time. And ultimately, learning from other growers is the key. We're the first to recognize that, which is why it's really important to have Brian and John part of this call.
And before we forget, thank you so much for letting us to talk in your great program. And don't forget that it's Easter. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you too. Yep. Thank you. Brian, any final comments?
Well, I'm very grateful to Margaret and Arash for starting this whole initiative in the beginning, and they've been great resources going forward. So I echo everything they said about the resources they do have that are available and collaborating with other farmers. I think growing saffron, if you are doing it as part of a larger scale farming business, is a great way to, is a lot of fun, is a good opportunity to supplement your income. For somebody like me, I actually do other things. I don't grow many other things, but so there's a few intense times of the year. I mean, mainly the harvest time, and I try to schedule the rest of my life around those few weeks of harvesting and processing, and then it's fairly light maintenance, weeding and watering, at other times. So I'm able to do a bunch of things and wear a bunch of hats. So and continue this nice little business. So thank you, and thank you for including me in this.
Thank you, Brian. Jonathan, any final words?
Yeah, once again, what Brian had said as well, thank you for Rasha, Margaret, and everyone that's been helping. It's especially nice to be able to connect so far, from Wisconsin to Vermont and everyone all across the country and the world, really. So it's been really, really tremendous. Saffron is a fun crop to grow. To me, it's like a crop of like optimism. It's something you plant in the fall. I mentioned the previous times, like a lot of times other veggies maybe start, dying off. You have things to clean, get ready for the next spring, and then the saffron is growing, and then you get the flowers. So it's a beautiful contrast of colors when everything else is already kind of dying and needs to get cleaned up. And then it's one of the first things you see in the spring, garlic, but then you also see the saffron, the foliage. It's just beautiful. So it's a fun crop to grow. It's a lot of work, but if do it, moderately, start off small, it's a really great addition to a diversified market farm, in my opinion. So thanks again, everyone, and happy growing.
Yeah, and before we log off here today, I just want to say thank you to Margaret and Arash and Brian and John for being on. But I also want to say thank you to our listeners. I know after I shared our first Saffron podcast recording, I had a few great feedback with that. So I also want to give the shout out, if our listeners have any other type of crops that they are interested in hearing about or learning about more, please reach out to somebody on the Cutting Edge podcast team, and we'd be more than happy to kind of dig in or try to get another crop going. So please feel free to reach out, have a conversation with your county educator, and we'd be happy to try to work through that. So.
Brought to you by the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension.